Hi, good evening. Welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started. So if you are getting your refreshments, go ahead and get those and take a seat. We're going to go ahead and get started here in just a second. Maybe. Can you hear me in the back now? Is that working? Yes? Hopefully. Well, good evening. I am Edie White. I am the coordinator for bullying prevention here for the district. Thank you for joining us this evening. Tonight we are going to be discussing, is it rude, is it mean, is it bullying? In my 14 years of education, I have heard the word bullying an innumerable amount of times in many positions as teacher, coach, as a counselor, as administrator, and oftentimes the word bullying is a word that is overused and used loosely for behaviors that are mean, rude, or thoughtless, not always used in the correct context. So it's very important as we try to address this issue that we are all on the same page of what bullying actually is. When everything is bullying, children who are actually bullied, they can fall between the cracks, go unnoticed. It's kind of like that boy who cried wolf. So if everything is bullying, then unfortunately those kids are not always noticed. So it's very important that we get this definition correct. Many of you are in attendance probably because of headlines such as these. They evoke fear. I'm a parent and I understand. None of us want our children to go through any situation such as these. And we know that bullying is an insidious antisocial behavior that has to be addressed. And I can say that Katy ISD is committed to preventing and responding to all allegations of bullying, hence why they created the position, why we have information sessions such as these. Surprise, we're gonna take a quiz. So if you have a smartphone or a device, if you're watching online, you may access this by entering www.clap.com/LPA. If you have a smartphone and you scan the QR code, it should take you directly to the survey. And I'll wait just a second for you to get on there. If you want to just write on your paper, if you don't have a smart device, that's fine as well. It will not let you advance to the questions until I release them. So by a show of hands, are we on the website or we still need a second? We'll wait just a second. Ready? Better? Okay. All right, so the first question, sorry, this one's not cooperating, so I'm gonna have to exit out just a little bit here. Students can choose their seats in Mr. Johnson's class. Aaliyah is about to take a seat when Julia says, I don't want to sit next to you, or I don't want you to sit next to me because you stink. Is this bullying or not? Go ahead and cast your vote. Second question. Brandon told Ethan he would beat him up if he didn't give him the basketball, and then he shoved Ethan out of his way. During math class later in the week, he threw a spitball at Ethan and kicked his chair out from under him. He threatened to beat him up if he told the teacher. Ethan never tells because he is afraid it will make the situation worse. Is this bullying or not? Question 3. In PE, Veronica told Jessie that she belongs on the boys' team. The day before, in homeroom, she wrote the words, "You're so gay," on Jessie's desk. Jessie asks her counselor if she can change her schedule to get away from Veronica because she makes fun of her hair and how she dresses every day. Is this bullying or not? Next one. Taylor and Devin are friends, and they happen to like the same girl. Devin starts spreading false rumors about Taylor online so the girl won't like him. Other classmates liked the post, made negative comments about Taylor, and shared the post on their page. Taylor complains of a stomachache frequently, hates going to school, and begs his parents to transfer him to another school. Is this bullying or not? Megan and Maddie have been friends since kindergarten. Maddie has started to hang out with different girls now that they are in middle school. Maddie doesn't talk to Megan at school, and when Megan texts Maddie about hanging out, she doesn't respond. Maddie posts a screenshot of Megan's messages on her Snapchat story with the caption, "Desperate." Megan's mother calls the school to report that she's being cyberbullied. Is this bullying or not? Last one. Jordan and Christian are longtime friends. They attend the same school, play on the same travel baseball team, and both are well liked by their peers. At times, they taunt each other about errors made in baseball, make fun of each other's appearance, and both get other friends to go against the other person. One day, Jordan can't take it anymore, and he punches Christian in the face at practice. Christian's parents come to the school and want to know what they're going to do about Jordan punching their son. Is this bullying or not? I know some of you want your results right now, but guess what? You're going to have to wait. So we're going to dive into what it actually means to be rude, mean, and then bullying, and then we'll go over your results into the presentation. And you'll probably figure out what some of these scenarios are as we go. Bullying is mean, but mean isn't necessarily bullying. Want that to sink in. Bullying is mean, but mean isn't necessarily bullying. Again, some of those behaviors are the same. Name calling is mean, right? Name calling can also be bullying. So hopefully as this presentation goes on, you'll be able to see where that line is drawn or where the difference lies. We know that we all deal with rude people in life. We deal with mean people. How many of you drive in rush hour traffic? You go Black Friday shopping, right? Some of us may have bosses that aren't the most pleasant. So it is something that we do have to encounter and deal with as we grow up, but bullying isn't something that our kids should have to endure, not any single one of them. What it means to be rude. Being rude involves comments or actions that aren't necessarily vindictive in nature. They're inadvertently doing or saying something that hurts someone else, and it could be due to poor manners or a lack of social skills. Some examples we might see in our classrooms or on campuses might be a kid who burps without saying excuse me, might be a kid who fails to recognize when someone speaks to them. They may interrupt when someone is speaking to them. They might cut in line. They might make a comment if they notice a book that someone's reading, and they may say something along the lines of, "That's a kiddish book," or "That's a baby book." not necessarily with the intent to hurt, right? So when someone is being rude, the intent is not to hurt the other person. On the other hand, when someone's being mean, there is intention. The person is trying to hurt or depreciate the other person. It is purposely saying or doing something to do harm. When someone's mean, it's typically on occasion, 1 or 2 times. It's not something that should be happening all the time. That's where we're going to cross the line possibly into bullying. Some examples that you might see on a campus would be a kid criticizing another person's clothing or appearance. Why did you cut your hair like that? Makes you look like a boy. I got that when I was growing up. Tripping someone when they're walking by or in PE. Destroying someone's property. Clearly there's intent with those behaviors. So the difference between being rude and mean is the intent. And as many of you know, proving intent is not always easy to do. And our campus administrators, when determining if something is bullying or not, have to be able to prove intent. And that's not always easy when we're dealing with humans and little humans at that. They don't always remember the events and the orders in which they happen, and we have to put all these puzzle pieces together. So we're going to go into much more depth into what bullying is and then behaviors that are oftentimes confused as bullying. So if at any point you have questions, please feel free to ask if you need some clarification as we go. Back in 2017, the law changed. David's Law was enacted in response to a tragic event. David Molak, a 16-year-old in San Antonio, committed suicide due to relentless cyberbullying. And throughout this presentation, I'm going to highlight some of the key changes within the definition. And I must say that I'm very proud of Texas and some of the changes that they've made within our definition, because not all states are where we are in terms of addressing cyberbullying. If you know this, in years past, if cyberbullying took place, campuses' hands were tied. There was nothing they could do because it took place off campus. And so now one monumental change is that we can if other elements of the definition are met. So we're going to go through the definition. As you can see, this is our state's definition. There are a lot of words, so I am going to go over it, and then I'm going to break it down piece by piece. So Texas Education Code defines bullying as an act or a pattern of acts by one or more students directed at another that exploits an imbalance of power through written or verbal expression, expression through electronic means, or physical conduct that one will physically harm another student, damage their property, or create fear, is severe, persistent, or pervasive enough to create an intimidating, threatening, or abusive educational environment for that student, disrupts the educational process or orderly operation of a classroom or school, or 4, infringes on the rights of a student. So as you can see, it's a quite extensive definition. And as an administrator, they have to apply this definition when a report is made. So say your son or daughter comes to them with this allegation of bullying. They now have to look at this definition and apply it to what has happened. So I'm going to go through each element of it. Again, if you have any questions throughout, please feel free to ask. So the first thing they're going to determine, is it an act or a pattern of acts? One large change within the definition is now a single significant act can constitute as bullying. In years past, there had to be a pattern or multiple occurrences for something to be deemed bullying. So I'm very proud of Texas for making this change in the definition of bullying. So I'm going to point this out. Mothers in the room, how many of you relate to this picture over here? When you see your kid being thrown in the air by your husband, right? You think, oh, my clicker's not working, right? That's what you see. Husbands, we're over here, right? And then the kid is in the middle. And this is a silly illustration to show significance, right? What's significant to you might not be significant to the next person. So it's really important that we look at the definition. The other elements of the definition will help us define whether or not something is significant or not. So a kid calling another kid stupid, definitely hurtful, right? None of us want our kids' feelings to be hurt. That's not something a school would constitute as a single significant act. Example of a single significant act. Last year I was on a middle school campus. I had a young lady who became the brunt of some jokes online, posted a very nasty picture of her on Instagram, made some very crude comments to her. I'm not going to say a lot of them because there are children in the room, but very, very insensitive, threatening her, encouraging her to harm herself. There's a big difference between a kid calling a kid stupid and all of what I just described, right? So we didn't have to wait for multiple occurrences like that to happen for us to call it bullying. With the changes in David's law, that is now a prosecutable offense. Because those kids enticed her to harm herself, enticed her to commit suicide, her parents could have pursued charges. They did not, but that is one large change, just so you know. If it's a situation of cyberbullying and it's documented on campuses, parents can pursue charges, okay? So they determine, was it one singular act or was it a pattern of acts of multiple occurrences? So that's the first part. Then, was it by one student directed at another, or was it a group of students bullying another student? Did their behavior exploit an imbalance of power? Exploitation means that the students knowingly and intentionally are doing something to cause harm to the other student. So there's intentionality. So rude, we said there's no intentionality, it's not done on purpose. Being mean, there is intentionality. And with bullying, there is intentionality. It's done on purpose. Some forms of power, oftentimes you probably think of that cliche schoolyard bullying scene of the bigger boy, right, beating up the younger kid or the smaller kid. So yes, physical size and strength is one form of power. A student may use their intellect to manipulate another student or use that as power over someone who is not of the same cognitive ability. Social status, so popularity, they use that as their leverage or their power. Access to information. So say your son or daughter has shared information with somebody. It could just be something about them personally. It could be a photo that's incriminating. That is where the power lies. So if that person puts that out there with the intent to humiliate, that is where the power lies. Does that make sense? Audience. We know oftentimes bullying takes place in front of others. The audience could be what they are using as their power. So if they orchestrate something to go down in front of other people to garner all of these laughs, they could be using their audience as their means of power. Now with technology, there's anonymity. So with anonymity, obviously we'd have to, as administrators, figure out who is in charge of a post and who's responsible, which makes it pretty difficult at times. But that is how some people gain power over another, is being anonymous. Okay, so we'd have to determine, did the student or the group of students knowingly use some form of power against the other person? And I'm just going to be honest, this is oftentimes where a situation is deemed something else versus bullying, because this is not always easy to prove. All right? So an administrator has to be able to prove that there was intent and that they used some sort of power against the other person. Then it's looking at the actual behavior. So if you look at the comic strip up here, poor Calvin, he is always subject to bullying with Mo. Mo says, "I want that truck, Twinkie. It's mine, Mo. I brought it from home. And I said, give me that truck. Mo, you can't just take things from people because you're bigger. I'm not taking it. You're giving it to me because we'll both be so much happier that way." Calvin, how touching, right? Poor guy. So in this situation, Mo is using his physical size and strength, right? He's exploiting that as his power against Calvin. So your administrators then have to determine what type of behavior. Did it fit in any of the next 4 categories? So physical bullying. Physical bullying is the most easy to spot because it's some type of physical act or aggression. Now, that doesn't mean that it doesn't take place outside of an adult's eyes, but physical bullying could be kicking, tripping, hitting, pushing, destroying someone's property, spitting on them. Verbal or written aggression. So if you were growing up, when I grew up, this is how people, we didn't have text messages, so people would write it on the locker room or bathroom stalls, right, and hope that someone were to see it before it got erased, right? So it's name calling, it's teasing and taunting, could be homophobic or racist remarks aimed to depreciate or humiliate somebody. There's social aggression, which is extremely hard for our administrators to prove because we have to prove that a child is purposefully trying to damage someone's reputation. They're purposely excluding them from participating in some type of activity, that they're spreading rumors, again, to humiliate them. This could be kids on a playground who knowingly invite someone over to their game on purpose to make fun of them, to call them names or make fun of their ability in a sport. It could be a group of friends who target a student who maybe is isolated and doesn't have as many friends, and they purposely go out of their way to call them a loser or a loner or whatever it is. They're using that social capital against the other person. And then there's cyberbullying, and I don't know about you, but I would not want to be growing up today with electronics as a teen or even a young elementary age student. So cyberbullying involves any type of use of technology to call names, make threats, spread rumors through our messaging apps, through text groups, through social media. So now they've determined, again, was an act or a pattern of acts, how many people were involved, and what was the type of behavior that was displayed. Doesn't stop there, okay? Now they need to determine, did the behavior physically harm that student? Did it damage that student's property? Or did it cause that student to be in fear of harm? Did the behavior or was the behavior severe, so it was serious, it was egregious in nature to cause this threatening, intimidating, or abusive environment? Was it persistent, so ongoing or continual? So if that kid was called stupid every day, right, we would call that a persistent behavior. Was it pervasive, so widespread, could happen anywhere at any time, and now with electronics, it makes it a whole lot easier to have 24/7 access to somebody, whether they have technology themselves or not. Did it disrupt the educational process or orderly operation of the classroom or school? So what type of disturbance, if any, did it cause? Did it infringe on the rights of the victim? And every single child has the right to feel safe at school. Every single child has the right to an education. Okay? So as you can see, this is a very extensive definition, and it is not always easy for admin to make the determination that what they are presented, because we're only as good as the information as we have, right? And with bullying, oftentimes it goes underreported or not reported at all. So it's extremely important, kids that are in here, please listen to me. If someone is bullying you, you please tell somebody, right? Yes, ma'am. No, it does not have to be all four, but it at least has to meet one of those. And here in a minute, I'm not going to give all this explanation. We're going to go through it, boom, 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 so you can see. Does not stop there. So then the analysis continues. We have jurisdiction over certain locations, right? As a campus administrator, we have jurisdiction over our school, school-related activities or events, and our vehicle for student transportation. This does not include our transportation to daycares. So we will get phone calls, concerns about students and misbehavior on a preschool bus, or sorry, not preschool, the daycare bus. We don't have jurisdiction over that because it's not under our authority. It's not our daycare, if that makes sense. So that would be something that would have to be taken up with that daycare provider. Off-campus cyberbullying. So one large change, again, with David's Law is we are now able to address cyberbullying that takes place off of campus if it interferes with a student's educational opportunities or substantially disrupts the orderly operation of a classroom or a school-sponsored or related activity. So again, this is a huge applause to Texas for broadening this definition, because I can't tell you how frustrating it was in the past when something would come to our attention that we couldn't do anything about because it did not happen within our four walls. So this is a large change. It does have to meet the other elements of the definition, but we are able to intervene in these situations. So we're going to go through this the whole thing all together. So I want you to think, how many of you, by show of hands, when you hear the word bullying, a situation comes to mind? I want you to either with your neighbor or internally process and see it if it would actually meet the definition according to the state, okay? So was it a single act or a pattern of acts? Was it one or more students? Did it exploit an imbalance of power? And I want you to identify what that imbalance of power was. What was the behavior? If we answered yes in all of those, we can keep going. If we answered no at any point, it's not bullying. Continuing. Did it meet any of these elements? Did it physically harm that person or damage their property? Did it create fear for that student? Did it create an intimidating, threatening, abusive environment? Disrupt the operation of the classroom or school? Or did it infringe on their rights? If we say yes, we can continue. If we say no, it's not bullying. Did it happen with an electronic device? In the instance I gave you earlier, it did. So if it was yours in your situation and you said yes and we continued, let's keep going. Did it happen outside of school? And did it interfere or disrupt with that student's education? In the example I gave you earlier, it did. So we can call that bullying. If the cyberbullying took place off of school grounds and it did not impact the school or their educational opportunities, no, we could not call that bullying. And there are times where this happens. So say a student is unaware that someone made a post about them. That does happen. But another student may report it, and when we call that kid in and we talk to them, they have no idea that this has happened. it doesn't meet that definition if it did not substantially interrupt the environment or impact their schooling, right? Let's say it had nothing to do with technology. So are we still applying the definition to yours? If it involved like name calling or it involved physical aggression, did it happen on school property? Did it happen at a school event? Did it happen on school transportation? If we say yes, then we can call it bullying. But if we say no, then it's not. So stuff that happens within the neighborhood is without our jurisdiction. It's outside of our jurisdiction. So if kids get into an altercation, you need to call the law enforcement, okay? So we cannot intervene in situations that take place off of campus and say when they get to school, nothing happens. We might have checked all of those boxes, right? But if we can't check that box that it took place on campus, even though it was physical, then we don't have the authority to intervene. Now, does that not mean that we can't sit down with kids and talk to them? I'm sure many of the educators in this room would say absolutely. We'll sit and talk to the kids and try to come up with a plan, but we can't issue consequences for them for their behavior in your neighborhood, okay? Hopefully all of that makes sense. So there are behaviors that are oftentimes confused as bullying and reported as bullying. So I'm going to go through several of those. Disliking someone. We cannot make all kids be friends. Now, we can address if their behavior is inappropriate, but we cannot make them be friends. And so sometimes parents will say, well, she doesn't want to be friends with her. Well, people have that right? You're not friends with every person you come into contact. I know not all of us in here are Mother Teresa. We don't like and get along with every single person we come into contact. It's a reality of life. However, if they're not treating someone correctly and they're being inappropriate, then I can guarantee you that your teachers and your admin will address it. It's just not bullying. A disagreement or argument between friends. Conflict is a normal part of life. We get into disagreements with our siblings, with our parents, with our spouse, sometimes with strangers, right? Conflict occurs. It's a part of life. Now, it depends again on what their behavior is. Is it something that we will intervene with? Absolutely, if it's inappropriate behavior and it's inappropriate for them at school, then we can step in. If the disagreement happens outside of our four walls, not on our transportation, no. But oftentimes disagreements or conflict are reported to us as bullying. A one-time fight or altercation. So sometimes these arise from, two kids going back and forth with one another. Sometimes it's unprovoked, right? It's probably going to be coded physical assault. That doesn't mean the campus is turning a blind eye and not doing anything about it. It's just not going to be coded bullying within our system. Could this turn into bullying? Yes. But as it's presented to you here, no. An accidental physical contact. We see this a lot. Think of our elementary kiddos who are taught to stand in a line, right? They have to stay in their little bubble, and how many times does the line stop and they step on people's the backs of their shoes and the kid gets mad and that they're bullying them or they did it on purpose. Or at Tompkins, there's 3,800 kids. I can only imagine that they run into one another in those hallways, right? That's a lot of kids in a very small space. Accident means that there was no intent. So we have to be able to prove, right, that there was intent, that the kid walked by them and shoved them with their shoulder. Luckily, we have cameras and we can look into situations, right, if it's in a camera's view. But if it's truly an accident, that's exactly what it was. It's an accident and not bullying. Cliques of students. This can very easily turn into a bullying situation, but we all know that we gravitate towards people that have common interests or similar likes as us, right? Now it's what that clique of students does. If they're going about their business and they're on the playground and they're playing and a kid tries to join and they say, We already have 2 teams. We're full. Well, they're not bullying, and they're not excluding them necessarily on purpose, right? They were playing. However, if they go about it in a different manner and how they treat that person as a result, or they're excluding them on purpose, like to humiliate them, then that's different, right? But again, they'd have to prove that intent. Bossy. I know we've all come across a bossy person in our life. When a student is being bossy, their intent is to get their own way or control. They're not necessarily targeting another student, okay? So sometimes that can be rude, it can be mean, it can be hurtful to other kids, but it isn't bullying. Bless you. Telling a joke. And this one can easily cross over. But say a kid tells a joke and it's offensive. We have to remember our kids are learning. They're learning social skills. They're learning what's socially acceptable and unacceptable. And in today's day and age, when they're exposed to so much, oftentimes they're repeating things that they've seen on TV or jokes, right? Here's the difference. If an adult talks to them and says, hey, that was really insensitive. That's not nice. We don't talk to others like that. And then they still do it, or they come up with another joke that's still along those lines, right? Then we could say potentially it crosses over into bullying. But telling a joke that they have no intent to necessarily hurt somebody isn't bullying. Expressing a difference of opinion. Think of how many times our kiddos are put into groups at school, and they're asked to work together. Working together and cooperation is a skill. They're asked to put all their heads together and come up with this project. And say one kid says, well, that idea is dumb. I don't want to do that. Might be mean. The kid might not like it, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're bullying. So see, some of these are behaviors that are reported either by kids or by parents as bullying. And I get it. We're parents. We want to protect our kids. We don't want our kids' feelings to be hurt, but again, when we call everything bullying, we're diminishing the kids who are actually suffering in silence every day. So it's very important that we get this right. So I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into conflict because this is probably the number one reported allegation of bullying, and we find that the majority of our allegations of bullying actually tend to be conflict. It's back and forth between the 2 students. So with conflict, they're on an equal playing field, and they just have differing viewpoints. It's a 6, it's a 9, no, it's a 6, it's a 9, it's a 6, it's a 9, right? It's back and forth, back and forth. With bullying, there is an imbalance of power. One person has more power than the other, and they're leveraging that power to do harm. Conflict, it arises. It's accidental, or it comes out of, a misunderstanding or a disagreement. It's a natural part of life. Bullying is intentional. It's planned. It's done on purpose to cause harm. Conflict is tit for tat. It's back and forth. Both kids are equally involved. And bullying, one person is defenseless, the other person is using their power over the other person. In conflict, there's typically a resolution or an attempt to a resolution. Where with bullying, it's repeated, it's ongoing, and there's no expiration date until hopefully one of us is made aware and we can do something about it. So I like to think of these 2 analogies. You can think of conflict as tug of war. It's back and forth. Both kids are involved. It's tit for tat. Whereas bullying is like the teeter-totter or the seesaw, right? In this illustration, you can see the larger student is in an advantage, right? And he uses that power, and the other kid goes flying off the teeter-totter. Again, it's kind of a silly illustration, but if you're a visual person like me, that's a good way for me to remember the 2, For bullying, it's more like that seesaw or teeter-totter. Perspective matters. This goes both ways, right? Schools need to be open-minded to listening to our kids and listening to our parents when they call with concerns. And parents, is just as important to keep an open mind when schools call about a concern. None of us want to believe that our kid is doing harm to another person, right? I'm a parent, I get it. It could be a shock, it could be a punch to the gut. And I hate to say this, but sometimes our kids don't come home and tell us the whole story. That doesn't always mean that they're intentionally lying to us, but from their perception, and their perception is their reality, that is their experience. They might not know all of the backstory or all the other details, right? It's how they perceive. They may perceive the situation as the kid is bullying them. But again, as administrators, they have to prove intent and there has to be evidence. Otherwise, it's he said, she said, right? And that goes for your kids as well as mine, right? We wouldn't want our kid to be on the receiving end of a consequence if there's no evidence to prove the fact that they were actually bullying another student or any other type of behavior for that matter. So it's very important to try to keep an open mind and have perspective. And think of our administrators, it's literally like throwing a 3,000-piece puzzle on the floor, and they're interviewing all of these people, and they're trying to get all the facts to put it together to try to figure out what actually happened. Because we know that there's always two sides of a story, and usually the truth is in the middle, right? So, how many of you want to know how you did on the quiz? First scenario. This is with Aaliyah and Julia, and she had mentioned that she didn't want her to sit next to her because she smelled. This is not bullying. This is a one-time incident. How many of you got it right? Are we willing to disclose, right? Let me find my scenarios here since I don't want to go back on there. Second scenario is with Brandon and Ethan. It is bullying. There was intent, it was repeated, and it created an intimidating environment for that student. Okay? The third one was with Veronica and Jesse. Again, the behavior was repeated. It was offensive. She didn't want to go back to that class. It created fear and intimidation for that student. The fourth one was with Taylor and Devin. They're friends. They like a girl. But then Devin starts spreading those false rumors. This is bullying, right? There was intention. He did it on purpose. He spread those false rumors. He got other people to join the party by liking and sharing and spreading those false rumors online. Very important, if it's cyberbullying, parents take screenshots. If you have access to them or kids, that evidence is very important. So it made me think of that when we're talking about this cyberbullying issue. Situation number 5 is with Megan and Maddie, longtime friends. In middle school, they kind of fell apart. This is not bullying. She did post something via Snapchat. She did say desperate. But we would probably not call that a single significant act unless there was more to the story, but I'm just giving you that surface level story, right? And so with that scenario, it would not be bullying. It would be a one-time offense. Does that mean that the counselor or the admin would not get involved? They're probably going to get involved, but it's not going to be called cyberbullying. So hopefully this is making sense. Again, if you have questions, please let me know. Last one. Jordan and Christian. This is not bullying. Yes, there was physical aggression, but the physical aggression took place off campus, right? So we do not have jurisdiction over that. If it would have happened on campus, we could have intervened in that type of situation. How many of you got 100%? I know somebody in here had to have, yeah. Any questions over those scenarios and why they didn't meet the definition? Or you can ask me later if you want to. So as you can see, it's not always black and white in behavior. It's not always easy to determine if a situation is bullying or not. But I do want to reassure you that regardless of how something is coded, our administrators are committed to creating a psychologically and physically safe environment for all of our kids. So regardless of how something is coded, we will intervene, we will put in support plans to keep our kids safe, right? So sometimes I know it's easy to get hung up on the word bullying and thinking that something is bullying, but as you can see, that definition is very extensive. It's not always so easy to apply that definition and it to fit. So I know sometimes parents get frustrated when they call and they say that my kid is being bullied, and you get the phone call back and they say, well, in our investigation, we did not find that it rose to the level of bullying. Again, that does not mean that the campus will not address it, but we have a definition that is provided by the state that we must abide by. And I am aware that there's still a level of subjectivity when it comes to this definition. We're dealing with behavior, and any behavior, there's still a level of subjectivity. But I can say I've met with every single campus in this district, and all of your campuses are very committed to making sure that your kids are safe and don't tolerate bullying. So how many of you wish that you had that magic wand to make it all go away? I do, but then I'd be out of a job. No, I would still have a job. But we will never eliminate bullying 100% because we're talking about human behavior, just like if we could get rid of people who harm one another outside on the streets, right? We can send our kids to school in hopes that they're kind to one another, and we can equip them with the skills and teach them to be kind. But we have to remember we're dealing with kids. Again, they're learning how to navigate their social world, and now with technology, it just compounds all of it. And it's very easy for kids to get caught up in situations, your children as well as my own. Any child can be a target of bullying, and any child could be the aggressor. Again, your child or my own. I have two my own. And none of us want to think that way. But I have a 16-year-old who has Snapchat. I hate Snapchat. So if any of your kids have Snapchat, make sure you monitor it. And I just, very quickly, I try to be on it and I try to monitor. But we've been in the car sometimes and she's talking about what the snaps are and talking. And I've been shocked sometimes because I know that I've tried to instill values in my kids where we're kind to one another. But it's very easy to get caught up in a conversation. If I swipe up or I swipe, I don't know, because I don't do Snapchat. But if I'm in agreement, right, I'm implicating myself if I'm in agreement. I think it's swiping up. Is that my cue? I gotta stop. So I just say that to say that, kids are learning and growing, and I've had moments where I'm like, don't you dare message back in that. Like, no way, don't get yourself caught up in that. But very easily, any of our kids can. I wish I could tell you, what to do to prevent our kids from being targeted from bullying, but it's really all within that kid who is doing the bullying. It's who they perceive as susceptible, as the target. And so as parents, I think there are some things we can do, and we're going to get into those. I know for me, my 12-year-old would probably tell you how annoying I am when it comes to, Shaylin, did you put on deodorant? Did you take a shower? She's in middle school, and you know how hormones go, and she plays athletics, and she's like, Mom, stop. I'm like, but I would never want a kid to make fun of you because you haven't showered. Go get in the shower, right? And I fight that battle, and I'm willing to do that because if I can prevent it, because I don't want her to be called the stinky kid, right? So there are some things we can do. I'm going to get into those a little bit more, but I just say that because I understand what it is to have kids and to be fearful and to want to avoid any of these tough situations. There is a culture of silence around bullying, and reporting bullying is not easy for our kids. They don't want to be a tattletale or a snitch. They may feel like they should be able to handle it on their own. They don't want to make it worse. They might feel ashamed or embarrassed that it's happening to them. So there are warning signs that you can look out for as a parent, and I know sometimes it feels like we're playing detective. These warning signs or flags aren't always because a kid's being bullied, but it could be a sign of some type of emotional distress or something going on with your kid. So I do want to caution, if you see something up here, it doesn't necessarily mean your kid is being bullied, but these are common warning signs, okay? So is your child withdrawn, sad, anxious, or depressed? Have you noticed a change in their behavior or mood? Maybe they weren't always sad or anxious, and all of a sudden they have become sad or anxious. Maybe they are typically an easygoing kid and they start lashing out. Or maybe they're fun-loving and then it's the opposite, right? They become isolated and don't want to include themselves in situations. A low self-esteem or a lack of confidence, which I think a lot of us go through that growing up, so that doesn't necessarily mean bullying, but yes, that could be a warning sign. They dislike school. They tell you they don't want to go. Maybe they avoid getting out of the car, especially for those kids who once loved school and all of a sudden dislike school. That definitely is a red flag that something is going on, whether it's bullying or not. A decline in academic performance, especially for those kiddos that are high performing and then all of a sudden you see their grades plummet. Maybe it plummets in one particular class. It may indicate that something's going on in that class. It could be that they're just struggling with pre-cal or whatever it may be, but it also could indicate that something's going on in that particular content class. They lose interest in activities, especially those activities that were once enjoyable. So if you notice that your kid just stops wanting to go to practice, or they don't want to be in drama anymore, or they don't want to go to even youth group, it doesn't always have to be at school, but if you see that they are no longer interested in something that they used to be interested in. They come home with unexplained bruises, cuts, or damaged property, or their items are always stolen or lost. They're always lost, but they're actually being stolen and they don't tell you because they're afraid to tell you. The somatic symptoms of having headaches or stomach aches. You notice a change in their eating or their sleeping habits. They avoid talking about social media or anxious when on technology, and there's a disclaimer. This is also pretty common. Kids don't want you in their business, right? But if you notice that they're very agitated when they're on their device, or you notice that they start crying or their mood changes when they're on their device, I would want to know what they're doing, what they're looking at, who they're talking with, right? Because it could be that something is happening in an exchange on their device. Kids may turn to self-harm or have suicidal thoughts or attempt suicide. So again, these are some indicators of potentially being bullied, but I also want to stress again, it does not mean that your child is being bullied, but it definitely warrants us to look and dig deeper because it could be an indication of some type of emotional distress or emotional concern. And just as there are indicators for a child who's being bullied, there are indicators for children who are actually the aggressor, children that are bullying others. Again, it does not mean that if your kid displays one of these, that they are bullying others, but again, there is potential here that they could be. So a strong need to dominate others, using threats or intimidation to get their way, having a superiority complex, so feeling that they're superior to others, a kid who is easily angered or impulsive, oppositional or defiant or aggressive behavior towards adults. And if they're that way towards adults, only imagine how they are towards children. Antisocial behavior, so physically or verbally aggressive, theft, substance abuse. Again, it could be totally separate, or it could be an indication of bullying. Difficulty conforming to rules, and that could be rules at school, could be rules at home, could be rules just within society. A low tolerance for those who are different than them, and you notice that they're making fun of others, or you see it in their messages. Focused on being popular, even if it's at other people's expenses. Students who are being bullied are more likely than to bully others as a result. And self-harm or suicidal thoughts or ideation or attempts. Research shows that kids who bully others are prone to anxiety or depression, and sometimes those unhealthy coping skills as a result. And when someone is the aggressor or bullying, they're not doing it just because. So as a parent, digging deeper to find out that why. So things we can do as parents: teaching and modeling kindness, acceptance, and empathy. And we know that our kids are sponges, and they look to us, and they look to see how we treat those around us, how we interact with our servers, and how we interact just out in public, right? Do we make rude comments about other people? Those things do stick with our kids. So modeling for our kids what we want to see. Teaching our children appropriate ways to deal with negative emotions. And we know that we all deal with negative emotions. And as adults, hopefully we have coping skills in order to handle those or deal with those appropriately. So if you help your kids, if it's that they need to go take a run, or they need to take deep breaths, or they need a timeout. This mom takes her own timeouts. I don't even make my kid take timeouts. I've learned my coping strategy is I'll talk to you when I've calmed down, right? So we all have to have coping skills in life. Capitalizing on those teachable moments. So your kid comes to you and says, I'm being bullied. Well, we need to ask a few questions, right? So what did the kid do? What did they say to you? So if the kid says, your kid says, well, he called me stupid. Okay, well, that's definitely not nice. How many times have they called you stupid? Did they do anything else to you? How do they make you feel? Are you afraid of them? Are you afraid of afraid to go to school? We have to dig deeper. So say they said they only called them that once. As you've learned, that's a mean moment. That is not bullying. So capitalizing on that moment to teach your kid that that was mean and validate their feelings because it was mean, right? But how do we handle it moving forward? How do we handle that situation? Setting clear behavioral expectations, so how we want our kids to behave and treat one another. Setting boundaries with technology, and I don't know how many of you in here, your kids have technology, but this is definitely key. Our technology is basically a weapon of mass destruction, and our kids don't always realize the power that they have with their technology and the mean things that can be said behind a screen. If you've seen my videos, you've heard me say it's easy to be mean behind a screen as adults and as kids. And so setting those boundaries with technology, and when you give your kids technology, so some of you I see have young kids, setting up those contracts with your kids the first time you give them the technology. Here are your expectations. And if you violate those expectations, here are the consequences. How many of you have ever taken a device from a toddler? How many of you have ever taken a device from a teenager? They will throw a fit just like a toddler. I learned that from experience. Monitoring their technology and social media. And I know for some parents that is very, you feel intrusive and you want your kids to grow up and have freedom. And I get that. But at the same time, we're giving them exposure to the entire world. And so it's really important as parents that we do monitor their technology. And technology does not make it easy on us. Like I said, I hate Snapchat. My oldest has Snapchat. She got it in high school. And as I'm constantly reading and learning about the updates that exist on it. Like one day I said, take me to that spot that says "for my eyes only." And she's like, "What, Mom?" I'm like, "Take me. I know that there's a spot now that you can like hide stuff. Take me to that spot." And so she opened it up and she's looking at me like I'm crazy. And she's like, "Mom, there's nothing there." I said, "Good. And it better stay that way. Nothing better be there, right?" So Snapchat doesn't have sharing rights. So I have an app downloaded on my phone that I can monitor their device, but Snapchat you cannot monitor. So physically I have to see or log into her account to monitor. So really just as adults trying to stay ahead of the game because they're constantly changing it on us. Monitoring your social gatherings. So if you are the mom or the dad that hosts kids at your house, just paying attention to how they interact with one another, or all of a sudden you notice that a little girl doesn't come over anymore. What happened? Did they have a falling out? Which that happens sometimes, right? But just really trying to monitor and gauge, are we engaging in appropriate behavior? Are we being nice to one another? Because I have seen that happen even at birthday parties, right? Where they socially exclude somebody at a birthday party when they're all there supposed to be having fun. So as the adult, just keeping a watchful eye on those things. And establishing open lines of communication. And I get it. When they're teens, they want nothing to do with you, but letting them know that they can always come and talk to you about any and everything, especially when we're talking about bullying. Again, a lot of our kids don't talk about it, and a lot of our kids won't talk about it. And so just really trying to open the door for our kids to know that it is okay. And I know sometimes it feels like this, right? They're tight-lipped. They don't want to talk about it, whether it's bullying or something else. Change the Netflix password. That's what I did in my house. And guess what? We had some conversations. It wasn't about bullying. It was about something else, but it did work. She came running down the stairs. It's not always easy for kids to talk about sensitive topics, so I suggest open-ended questions and starting off with, how was your day at school? What is your favorite class? Who do you sit with at lunch? Who do you play with at recess? And then you can get into maybe some more difficult, questions. What classes do you dislike? Are there any students you dislike? Why? It could be that you've noticed a change in behavior. So I've noticed X, Y, and Z. Did something happen that you would like to talk about? I oftentimes will pull in stuff that's happening out in the real world in my conversations. Hey, I just saw this article about bullying. Is this happening in your classrooms? Do you ever see this type of behavior? Has anyone ever done that to you? Usually it's pretty hard to start off with questions that way. They don't necessarily want to, why are you asking me that, right? So starting off with more easy questions for them to kind of get comfortable and working your way into the questions about bullying. So some strategies on what you can do as a parent if your kid is the target. And I know we're all mama bears, right, and papa bears, and we want to protect our kids, and I get it. Quick story, my oldest plays volleyball. She's 16, and we were at a volleyball game this past season, and she's up to serve. And I'm going to try to temper this conversation a little bit since we have kids in here. Made a comment about her hair looking like... I'm trying to think of a kid-sensitive way to say this. It was a very culturally insensitive comment, okay, about what her hair looked like. I'm sure you can use your imagination. My kid's biracial and has very curly hair. So as a parent, you can imagine I'm sitting there getting hives because every time she got up to serve, they're making this comment, and I'm beside myself that these teenagers are saying this. And I wanted to hurt a kid, and of course I didn't. But my 12-year-old sitting next to me, she knew what the comment meant. And so I was very angry, I'm not going to lie. And we get in the car, and she said, "Hey, Mom, did you hear them?" And I said, I did hear them. And she said, "That's okay, because we beat them in 3, and I aced them every time we serve. I got up to serve." And I was like, hallelujah. Like she wasn't like having a meltdown, because it was so culturally insensitive. And I know part of it is because we've had those teachable moments, and we've had that conversation about race, and we've had that conversation about loving who she is and her hair. And but as a mom, I was fit to be tied. I was ready to march over there in the middle of this volleyball game. Wouldn't have been a good idea, and I didn't. So I get it. I get wanting to protect your kid, and I get wanting to shield them from hurt and pain. But the best thing that we can do in a situation is to try to stay calm and check those emotions, right? Listen without judgment. When a kid is being bullied, again, it's very hard for them to open up. The last thing we want to do is say, well, what did you do? Why are they doing that to you? Or why didn't you stand up for yourself? Listening, hearing them out, because to even bring that up to you is going to be a challenge. Ask for details and document, and be ready to stomach probably some hard stuff. But it's very important that you write this stuff down: the who, what, when, where, how. Don't ask why, because if they're being bullied and we ask why, that basically makes it seem like they've done something wrong, right? Praise your child for coming and talking to you, because it's not always easy. And if we dismiss it or we downplay it, I can guarantee you they're not going to come talk to you again about it. So listening, being open-minded, and validating how they feel, because it does hurt. Reassuring that it is not their fault. Meet with the campus, and it's best to try to approach in a business-like manner, right? With our emotions in check, with that documentation, right? So you can guide the conversation with your campus. Creating a support plan with the campus on how we're going to proceed moving forward. How are we going to make sure that my kid is safe on campus, right? And I want to clarify something here that I often hear parents get frustrated with. They want to know what happens to the kid who is bullying. We're bound by FERPA, and we cannot explain to you the disciplinary action that we've taken against another child, just as we could not do that. We can't disclose that information about your kid. What we can talk about is the safety plan that we've put in place. So if that means that we've changed a schedule, or if that means that we have put them on a stay away agreement, that kid is forbidden to be around your child, or if we have a buddy system, or we have an alter passing periods, we can tell you the parts of the plan that don't violate the other kid's rights, just like we wouldn't violate your kid's rights. Building resiliency within our kids. We know that they are going to face tough times, but it's how we get up from those tough times. So capitalizing on your kids' strengths, trying to get them involved in activities or things that they like. It's important for us to try to help them with coping skills and strategies in these type of situations. Role playing, as silly as it may seem, it is very important to role play with our kids. So how to handle a situation should it happen again. Or how are you going to, what are you going to say, or what are you going to do again in the future if it were to happen? And seeking counseling if necessary. Your school counselors, and many of them are here today, are a great resource, but sometimes it's beyond their scope of training. And so there are wonderful resources within our community that can also offer support for our kids. And so I'm a firm believer if they need somebody to talk to or work through or process what has happened to help build their resiliency and their skills, we have plenty of outside resources to help with that. So if your kid is the person who is bullying others, what can you do? And again, I know none of us want to believe that our kid is capable of doing it, and there's an underlying reason as to why they're engaging in this behavior. So it's very important to stay calm, even though you're probably very upset that they're hurting somebody else, but trying to stay calm. Taking immediate action. Say you witness it, and you know that it's happening with the cell phone, or you witness it, stepping in immediately and sending the message that this is unacceptable behavior and we're not going to tolerate it, but I'm going to get you help, right? I'm going to get you the help that you need so that you don't feel like you have to do this to somebody else. And again, finding out the why. Help me understand why you're doing this. What is going on? Because there is something going on to lead a child to do this. Setting clear behavioral expectations and reinforce them. So mean what you say and say what you mean, right? If it's with their phone and you have a contract, then I'm going to have to take that phone, right? You're going to have to earn it back. They're going to have to prove that they can handle it without hurting other people. So I know as a parent that that's not always easy, but definitely reinforcing, setting those expectations and reinforcing the behaviors that we want to see in our kids. And partnering with the school. This is really important. And I get, again, we don't want to admit sometimes, or we don't want our kids sometimes to have those consequences. But when we try to eliminate those consequences, then they might not learn that example. And so as parents, that partnership with the school is key, right? The school is not out to get the kid. They just want the behavior to change. And so coming up with a plan for the student and how to replace those behaviors with more positive behaviors. And then seeking help if necessary. So this could be counseling, it could be mentors, it could be whatever it is based off of what your child needs and the root cause as to why they're doing what they're doing. So it's going to be definitely individual based on what the kid is needing. And in bullying incidents, there's one party that often goes overlooked, and that is our bystander or our witness to a situation. Studies have shown that bystanders are sometimes more likely to suffer from anxiety or depression as a result of witnessing bullying due to shame or guilt for not intervening. And there's research that shows that within 10 seconds, 57% of the time, if someone steps up in a bullying situation, it stops. So it's very important for us to encourage our kids to be upstanders. So not bystanders, but upstanders. And this is not always easy to do, right? That social pressure to fit in. They don't want to stand out. They might be standing around watching, trying to gauge, is it something serious enough that warrants me stepping in, but no one else is stepping in, so should I step in? Kids don't always have to step in and physically say stop or cut it out. They could go tell an adult. They could simply walk away and not give the aggressor that attention, because remember, oftentimes audience is power. So teaching them to walk away from a situation, to go get an adult to get help. Or they could see the person later and just say, I saw what happened to you and I'm sorry. Or they could see them at lunch sitting by themselves and be their friend. And so really encouraging our children to be upstanders and be kind to one another. And I know a lot of our elementaries have like the buddy bench at recess and some other awesome strategies to help our kids feel included. And it's amazing to see when kids take it upon themselves and don't want another kid to feel left out. So we have a lot of great things happening in our district. Praising your child for being an upstander, this is not easy, especially when they want to fit in, right? And if the kid who is doing the bullying is popular and I now am stepping in to save the other person, I now potentially could put myself out there, right, for the person to target me next, potentially. And that leads to the next one, monitoring for residual impact. Because, again, the studies showing of the negative impact it does have on kids who witness bullying. They may be fearful for retaliation. They may start to feel guilty or shameful that they didn't step in sooner. And then, again, seeking counseling if necessary, if there's additional support that they may need as someone who has witnessed bullying. And that is all I have for you. So if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer your questions. I do ask if it's an individual situation and it's personal. I want to honor that situation, and I would love to have a conversation with you privately afterwards. Or my contact information is right here, so you can take a picture of it. It's also on the district website. But I'm more than happy to take questions. I would just prefer to have individual situations. I would prefer to either address them here after. I'll be around because it is wrapping up a little bit early, or just contact me. So is there any questions that you may have? Yes. Thought I used my cheerleader voice. So the question was evidence. I gave the example for cyberbullying, taking screenshots. The question was, what other type of evidence? That is a very good question. So oftentimes, bullying does take place in presence of other people, so it's very important that there are witnesses to a situation. So that's probably one of the first questions that your admin will ask of a child is, was anybody else present? So, and kids who are isolated or tend to be alone, those are easy targets. So I oftentimes will encourage schools to have a buddy system where that kid's never alone. So that's one, witness statements. Two, if your kid is coming home, I would document that as evidence. Sometimes they use cameras at the campus. They use teacher statements. But as you can, it's not always easy, right? Probably the easiest one is something we catch in person or hear. Unfortunately, kids are savvy enough to oftentimes do that in passing when they're passing a desk or in the hallway or unsupervised areas. So I just always strongly encourage that kids are never by themselves, especially if they're having an issue, that they're with somebody else so that there could be someone there to be a potential witness to a problem. My admin in the room, do you have any other suggestions as evidence? Yeah, it gets pretty difficult. So witness statements, I can tell you that we use witness statements quite a bit in really any of our behavioral investigations, but for sure with bullying. Yes? So the question was if the person has been in contact with the campus and they feel like the situation has not been resolved, what are the next steps? I am a resource to parents, but there's a grievance policy in place, right? We do have, all of our principals have bosses, a few of those are in the room, our area superintendents, but there is a policy in place for parents to file a grievance or to voice those concerns about a situation if it has not been handled the way that they believe that it should be. Yes. So for a bullying investigation, they have 10 days to complete the investigation unless there are extenuating circumstances. So think of our situations that involve a lot of students, and they would have to call in all of these witnesses or a group of people. If those people are absent or they can't get with them right away, so sometimes they do take a little bit longer. If your child is the target in a situation, you should be notified by a campus within 3 days that there has been an allegation of bullying and that they're conducting an investigation or they're going to be beginning an investigation. If your kid is the alleged aggressor, there isn't a hard number for the days that they need to contact you, but I can guarantee you they're going to contact you and let you know that they're looking into a situation. But for sure, if your kid is the target, they legally have to contact you within 3 days that they're beginning an investigation, and it should be wrapped up within 10 unless there's extenuating circumstances. Yes. So we do have students that are transferred to other campuses as a result of a bullying situation, and there is a formal process that you go through in requesting a transfer. We do have open campuses that our students are granted in those situations. You can't just pick a random campus to go to. We have board-approved campuses that are open for transfers, but there has to be documentation for bullying. So we can't just grant a transfer because a parent calls and says they've been bullied. There should be documentation at a campus that there has been an issue. But do we have that happen? Absolutely, we do. You can ask me a question. Do you have a question? Did you tell your teacher? Well, I'm glad you told him to stop. Make sure you tell your teacher, okay? Every circumstance is different, and I'd be willing to talk with you after. I just want to say when it comes to moving kids' classrooms, we do have to take a look at schedules and the special supports that some kids may receive. And so, especially at the secondary level, our master schedule kind of dictates how we can move kids. At the elementary, just depending on the teacher availability, or say it's an ESL class or one that has in-class support, just really depends on which student we have to look at moving. So unfortunately, sometimes the student who is being targeted that's the safest way to help them. I'm not saying it was in this situation. I don't know. I'd be happy to talk with you after. But there are times where, unfortunately, the student who is the target is the one and not that it has to move. It's in order to keep them safe. But say a kid is special ed or ESL, or they're in GT classes or pre-AP classes and they're only offered at certain times. Sometimes it makes it really hard to move that kid because of the other classes they're in. And I know that that's really unfortunate because, sweetie, you didn't do anything wrong, okay? So sometimes it has to do with the circumstances that we really can't control in terms of master schedule or staffing. But I'm not sure in this particular situation, but I would be happy to speak with you after. Okay. Any other questions? Yes. So the question is, what age can we start talking about bullying? Well, I can tell you that in elementary, they start talking at a very young age, and oftentimes it's talking about what it is to be mean or rude, or there are a lot of great books out there that we use as resources in addressing it, because we're able to use the characters in the story and help guide and use them as an example of, is this a kind way to treat somebody, or what's a better way, or how do you think that this kid is feeling because this kid said X, Y, or Z. And so I don't think that it's too young in elementary to talk about it. They might not understand necessarily what bullying is, so oftentimes we talk about kindness and what it means to be kind to one another. And then as they get older, building their vocabulary. But I think it's never too young, honestly, to start just talking about being kind to other people. You're welcome. Any other? Yes. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So the question was, is there a way that an upstander can report concern? And we do have the bullying tip line. So if you have the Katy on the Go app right now, you can see that there will be a little talk bubble, and it's called the bullying tip line. And so students and parents can submit tips that way about any concerns. Campuses also have Safety Net in place, which is a document where kids can fill out. And a lot of our campuses also have the request to see counselor form. Some of them are paper pencil, and then others are scanning a QR code that allows them to speak to their counselor about a concern, and that could be really any concern. So we have multiple avenues in which kids can report concerns, and we strongly encourage them to do that if they see or hear of anything. Thank you. Well, I thank you so much for your time and your attention. If you need anything, please feel free to contact me.